Now let's focus on through three different assessment models or tools. One of them is Coucher's assessment model. The other one is Culturogram, and the third one is Person and Environment or PI. Coucher developed a framework in 1994 for assessment. This is a two-dimensional framework for helping social workers assess both needs and strengths of a client. On the vertical axis, we see both at the top the strengths or resources, and at the bottom the deficits, obstacles, or challenges. So, and then on the horizontal line on one side, on the left, we see the environmental factors, both from the family, community, and other levels, and the individual or personal factors. So in quadrant one, we see specifically the strengths and resources related to the community, family, church, and other support groups. In quadrant two, we should explore individual strengths, such, for example, any positive characteristics or coping skills or resilience that the client has. And in quadrant three, we should explore what is there in the community, family, that is not conducive to the well being of the client. And finally, in quadrant four, we should explore what individual factors contribute to the problem um, of the client, such as any biopsychological traits or factors that may affect the client negatively or their well being. Okay, so let's look at an example using Coucher's framework for assessment using a made up client named Diana Olivares in a case study to look at an assessment, a holistic assessment of this client. So, in this particular example, Diana was a young woman from Mexico. She has three kids, and it's reporting to caseworker situations of domestic abuse from her husband. And her husband left their house, but she's desperate for him and wants him to come back to the house, even after the physical abuse she has endured. So, in this case, in quadrant one, we see the environmental or familiar community strengths or resources that Diana has. She does have access to social resources, to medical care. So those are positive resources that would help her out in the situation. Individual or personal factors, she is taking a risk by talking to the social worker about the situation, and she does express caring feelings to her family, and she is persevering under stressful difficulties. Under the quadrant three, with negative environmental factors, we see that she is experiencing isolation. We don't know whether she's an undocumented immigrant. That would be a negative factor in reporting domestic abuse. She doesn't have employment, and she did not graduate from high school. So she doesn't have a lot of job opportunities. And in terms of individual personal deficits or obstacles, she, has is willing to put up with the abuse, and she's experiencing depression, and she has low self-esteem. As you can see, this model helps us to see beyond the needs or deficits of our clients. Sometimes we may encounter clients that bring behaviors or problems, and it might be hard to see their strengths. Then it is when our cultural awareness and humility may be tested, because we need to practice the art of testing our sensitivity. For example, we can see clients seeking help and taking the risk of sharing problems, and we can see clients as persevering, as resourceful, and making the most out of their limited resources. We can also see other positives, such as wanting to further their knowledge, become educated, or furthering the skills. And or we may see clients seeking justice, caring for family members, clients who are responsible. So again, we need to understand and see different perspectives, and we need to see clients as having the capacity of having self-control, um, and overcoming stressful situations. So again, we need to see clients from alternative perspectives and not just their needs or deficits. Now let's look at a culturogram and what it does for clients that are marginalized. A culturogram is a family assessment tool that provides a graphical representation of various aspects of an individual and family's culture. A culturogram begins with the center where the family and individual are located, and around the center there are aspects of the family. For example, time in the community, how long has the family lived in the community, legal status. So members in a household can have different immigration statuses. So you can have undocumented immigrants, immigrants with a green card, and U.S. citizens all living in the same household. So in the case, you should consider how their legal status of some of the family members may prevent the household from seeking social services. And immigration, why did they immigrate to the U.S.? Did they come to the U.S. For violence or seeking employment? And for how long have they been in the U.S.? Um, Language spoken, what language is spoken in the community, and what language does the family speak? Health beliefs, what illnesses do they seek health care services for? Because different families have different beliefs about seeking health care. What holidays does the larger community celebrate, and which ones are important, or which one does the family celebrate? Impact or crisis event. For example, a new stage of life can lead to a developmental crisis. So, for example, if it is a young couple having their first child, that may be a developmental crisis, or children going from childhood um, to adolescence, or so etc. And out of the blue crises such as accidents, sudden illnesses, violence, deaths, a deportation in the family. So those would all need to be taken into consideration to see how they're impacting the family. Also, family education and work values. What are the family values in terms of work? Is the family um, what are their beliefs in terms of that, and how do the family process their communication? And also, cultural institutions. Are the family involved with social clubs, churches, temples, mosques? So remember that religion and spirituality are very important to understanding the culture of a family. So this culturogram helps us to have a visual representation, visual and holistic representation of the family, of both their needs and strengths. So here we see a sample culturogram. We see the names of and ages of the family members, and we see different factors or characteristics of the family, outside of the family, that is impacting the individual and family well-being. And again, this is another example of a culturogram. The third tool that included in this presentation is called the Person and Environment, or PI. And this framework views a person not as a person with existing problem, but rather views an individual in an environment with complex problems. So the individual is affected by the environment rather than seeing the client as having existing problems inside of them. So this model goes beyond the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. This framework helps to systematically record, because the DSM is more of a disease-oriented system that allows social workers to identify and record the social functioning of clients, because the DSM is more of a medical model and sees clients with problems as residing inside of them, or the individual that sometimes is inherited. And in contrast, the PI model helps incorporate systems, ecological systems, psychological theories, and other human behavior holistic theories into social work assessment practice. PI provides social workers a common language to help social workers describe a client's problem and social functioning. It is also a concise description of a social phenomenon that could provide treatment or amelioration of a problem among a group. It is a means of gathering data required to measure the need for services, design a program, and evaluate effectiveness. And it is a clear communication tool among social work practitioners and between practitioners and administrators and researchers. The PI structure has 4 factors, and each factor describes a feature of the client situation. So, what are the problems in social functioning presented by this client? What are the client's strengths or capacity to resolve them? Second, what problems exist in the social institutions in this community that are affecting the client? What resources or strengths are available? How severe and how long has this problem lasted? Third, what mental health problems are presented? What strengths are presented by the client? And fourth, what physical problems are noted and what are the client's strengths in this area? So this is an example of factor 1, social functioning. So what is the social role that the client is having the problem since? Is it within the family, other interpersonal, occupational, or special life situation? And what type of problem is the client having in this social role? Power, ambivalence, responsibility, dependency, loss, isolation, victimization, mixed, severity of the problem, like how severe is the problem, duration, how long has the client presented this problem, and ability of client to cope with this problem. And with environmental, and what kind of social system is a client facing the problem? So again, there are different categories there: legal, health, safety, social services, etc., and a specific type of problem within each social system, severity of the problem, and duration of the problem. I will also include another handout that would be located on Canvas that provides more specific information about the PI system. So again, all of these assessment models will help us better understand both the needs and strengths of the client from a more holistic perspective. So for the case study, you will need to apply one of these assessment models or frameworks to better understand the situation of the family in the documentary.